Glad you made it back, Rams. For those of you just joining us, you are watching Humans of CSU on CTV. Joining me now in studio is Dr. Michael Humphrey, a professor of journalism and media communication here at CSU. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So what's your favorite part about being a professor at CSU?
I mean, just dealing with students. You know, I like young people. They keep me young. As many of my students know, I'm sort of naturally immature, so I enjoy joking around with them and getting to know them, and I enjoy talking about real life with them too. A lot of students come into my office and we talk about real things, and even in class we really get into some issues that matter to people both socially and personally, and I really enjoy that part of it, the interaction. Yeah, that was my favorite part of your class when I took it last semester, was the fact that it was so applicable to real life, and you just kind of walk out of there and you, like, I can actually use this and use the stuff that I'm learning in my classes and apply it to my future career. So, well, you know, you are the kind of student that's important to that class, because if we don't have students who engage and like, you know, think through what it means to do media in this digital world, and what it means to be a good person, what it means to be a good journalist. Those are the conversations we have, and I really believe the students teach the class as much as I do. So students like you are perfect for the class.
So you say the word digital or world, and I know we talked a lot about that, but I'm sure people in the journalism department as well as like other students can kind of see that evolving. What ways do you see it evolving and changing? I mean, you know, I in a big picture way, from the time I was your age, you know, which was really before the internet. It wasn't before the internet, but it was before the web, and it was before the internet had become, you know, a daily part of our lives. You know, a very few number of people actually made the decisions about what we were going to see on television and in newspapers and here on the radio, and that has massively changed. And I think we're just seeing more and more permutations of that change. You know, what does it mean when everybody gets a channel? When everybody can talk in multiple channels, you know, and I think we're still getting used to it. I think we're very much toddlers in this digital world, and so we're still trying to figure out, you know, where do I fit? Who am I in these places? And what does it mean to be good in the digital world? You know, because I think we have a pretty good idea of that in the offline world, but online I think we're still learning, and I think that's going to take a lot of time, you know. Yeah, I agree. How long have you been teaching at CSU? I came here in 2011 from New York City. I had just gotten my master's degree at NYU. It was coming home because I grew up in Colorado. I grew up in Westminster, Colorado, and so it was the first time I'd been home living in Colorado for 25 years. Oh. And so that was a big change for me. Yeah. And I had never taught college before. I started as the student media advisor, but then I started teaching a class the second semester I was here, so I'm going on 7 years now. Oh, wow. Yeah. Not that that's a long time. No, it's a long time, but it's gone fast. Yeah. What are some of the ways that you've had to kind of adapt your teaching to all the new technologies and, you know, patterns that we've seen in the journalism world? That's a great question, because, you know, when I first started, I had a concept. All the things that we talk about today were there, most of them anyway. Like, people were really into YouTube when I started teaching, and people were just getting used to Twitter as a really important tool, and Facebook was already huge, you know. But what we didn't really care about at that point was Instagram and Snapchat, you know. And so as the new platforms came along that we were looking at, I had to decide, is this a trend or is this a fad? You know, are we gonna be talking about this in a couple more years, or is it gonna completely go away? And I think that's the main thing I'm always asking is, what do I teach students that's going to be relevant 5 years from now? Because otherwise your college education isn't worth that much. Right. And I've found that really, like, for one thing, the growth of social media platforms has slowed down quite a bit, you know, since Instagram and Snapchat and Pinterest, you know. But also there are just really classic things to learn about community engagement, about storytelling, that really fit all the platforms in one way or another, and learning how to read them and then fit into them is really the critical
thing we teach, and if we can learn that, then we can adapt to almost anything.
Yeah. How do you, so that was, I just love that about your class, that it was just so relevant. How do you kind of determine what is a fad and what is a trend, and what you like deem worthy to teach to us?
I still do reporting. I report for Forbes about digital media, and one of the reasons I do that, it's actually takes a lot more time than I have, but one of the reasons I do is I get access to leaders in this world, in the digital media world, because that's what I cover. And so I tend to ask them a lot of questions that don't go in the articles, but will go into my classroom, So I'm getting a lot of free advice from people from New York City, London, Los Angeles, San Francisco, about what to be thinking about, and I use that all the time to help students. And then I read all the time too, and then you start to get a nose for what's gonna work and what's not. Partially from listening to students, as you know, I listen a lot to what students say about their own uses, and that probably teaches me as much as talking to the experts. When students tell me I like this and this is why, or I don't and this is why, I learn a lot from that, and that's a really important part of the class, is me learning from you.
Right. That's awesome, because we love that open dialogue between ourselves and our professors. I think that just helps us learn so much better than when it's like a lecture. But I think that incorporating the skills into your classes really helps us. What's one of your favorite teaching moments that you've had here?
I'll never forget. This was probably my second year. One day I asked, I was kind of like, I started out thinking a professor had to lecture for 50 minutes. And even though I didn't like hearing my voice for that long, I did it because I thought that's what you did. And one day I asked a question, just because it interested me, and the class got out of my control. Like, we talked about that question for the rest of the class. And I remember seeing in the students' faces how much more engaged they were. And in my own life, I was like, oh my gosh, I learned so much today. And I thought, that might be a better model. And that really started to change the way I taught. And that will always be, like I said, I was probably 2 years in. So for 2 years, I just tortured students with lectures. But then after that, I was like, wait, I think we can have conversations. And as long as I know what we need to talk about by the end of the class, we could probably pull this off if we did this. And that's what I've done ever since. Yeah.
What is some of your favorite things to teach to the students?
I love talking about user experience. I love talking about what it means to be on the other side of the screen, because we're a production department. We talk about producing content and telling stories all the time, but what does it mean to be on the other side of that? When do you care? When are you engaged? And when we think about ourselves as users, I think we become better storytellers. And so I love, in every point of the class, whether we're teaching how to do social media, whether we're teaching hyperlocal journalism, or how to write something, how to do video, a lot of what we do is consume media and talk about it, what we do and don't like about it. And I love that, because I get to hear all these amazing pieces of feedback that I think are informing us about how to be better storytellers.
Yeah. So the consumer experience is changing, as we all know, just as consumers and as students. So you just got back from a virtual reality conference in Colombia.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, we were talking about transmedia. That was the big topic of the day. And that's something that we teach in the class, the idea that a story can cross over media when it makes sense to. So some things are better for video, some things are better for audio, some things are better for writing. And so there were people I was the only person from the United States. My wife and I were the only two people from the US there. And so it was just so fascinating to hear people from all over the world talk about storytelling.
Yeah. And how it's different.
Yeah, and then Colombia is an amazing place.
Oh gosh, it sounds so
everybody
beautiful.
Should go there. It's incredible.
I'll buy my plane ticket tonight.
Do it.
Thank you for joining us. So we're going to take a short break, but up next we're going to sit down with Taryn Lesser from the CSU Equestrian Center to talk about their upcoming Halloween event. So don't go anywhere.